Well, I'm David Lee. My family has been in this section of the country here in Brantley County for many generations, and I happen to have knowledge about High Bluff Church, which is behind me here, and where it came from, how it came to be. Um, and so what I wanted to tell you, some of this comes from the minutes that were kept, some from other books that I've been able to have had access to, and some information from the old folks that went before. High Bluff Church was first constituted in 1819, and it was set on a high bluff on the river in eastern Brantley County on the Satilla River. That's where it was first constituted by several members that came out of the little Satilla church. And they formed their own little church there in 1819. And 2 years later, they what we call extended an arm, meaning they reached out to this community and established this church. That was in 1821, where High Bluff currently sits. At the time they did that, the one in eastern Brantley County was called High Bluff. This one they called Big Creek, named after a local creek, which is Big Creek. This church, every time they met, they kept their minutes, and they sent their minutes back to their mother church, which was High Bluff, down in eastern Brantley County, owned lands on the Satilla River that later was owned by the Strickland family of Brantley Telephone Company. My father actually was able to visit the site and said there was very little left, but there were a few remains from the old building that were left that he was able to see where it sat at. I've never been able to go in there. So a few years go by and cholera came through this part of the country and made a lot of people sick and killed a lot of people. And they didn't understand what cholera was at the time and didn't know how to deal with it. So the only solution they had was to assign that cholera disease to the location they were, and they moved off and left it to try to get away from it. That's what happened, I'm told, in eastern Brantley County around that High Bluff community, is that cholera came through, and a lot of people contracted it, and they finally abandoned that location down there. I don't know exactly when. This location up here continued to serve as a church, continued as Big Creek. Eventually, in 1844, this church joined the Alabahaw River Primitive Baptist Association after they sent up a letter, and they sent it up as Big Creek to join, and they joined the association and participated in it until High Bluff was finally completely abandoned and the name was no longer being used. So this group, being a daughter church of that original one, decided they wanted to take on the name of High Bluff, which was their original church. And according to the minutes, they sent up a letter to the association with the query, would it be permissible to change their name from Big Creek to High Bluff? And the answer came back from the association that they had taken the matter up and decided that no, that would not be proper, and that they should keep their name as Big Creek, which is how they were received. The very next year, in the minutes, you read where the association, in receiving letters, also received one from High Bluff Church, which we know to be this church, which tells me that the people here didn't get the answer they wanted from the association, so they made their own decision, and they sent their letter up, and it was received. Since then, which would have been in the middle to just after the 1850s or so, this church then was known as High Bluff Church and has been known as High Bluff Church since then. The early minutes records times when they couldn't meet for a few months at the time, and the minute would say, due to Indian uprisings, that the people were afraid to leave home, so they would stay forted up in home. That was a fairly unsettled time in these parts at that time, and so they couldn't meet every month like they typically would. There's also records during the late 1800s, up to around 1860 or 70, when they actually received people they noted as being a slave. They would receive their name. I remember one in particular said, we received Rose, a slave of, and it gave the name of the slave owner. I don't remember who that was. And then there were several more that they received into the full fellowship of High Bluff Church. So there actually were slaves that were members here at that time. After the Civil War and the emancipation, where the slaves were freed, then you begin to see in the minutes letters of dismission, where a letter of dismission was issued to Rose to go and join another church. I don't know, but I'm deducing that they probably formed their own church and they left High Bluff to go be together there. That's what I would assume from that. After that, we don't see any more reference to any of those kinds of things. There's no more the Indian uprisings were done. All that was done. Everything from then was internal. There's records of people joining, people leaving, people being buried, the elders that were here. But High Bluff continues to be an active house of worship up until today, and is probably one of the oldest active, continually active churches in this area. I don't know what the oldest one would be, but this one would be right up there. So that's my information about High Bluff. That's what I wanted to share with you today.